Just firstly, Mark, I'm just keen to explore the timeline for real devolution of powers to LEPs. How do you see that?
Well, we're working on a number of different fronts. So in terms of the new homes bonus and in terms of the business rate revaluation, those consultations are concluding. Those will be set out shortly by Eric Pickles, and there'll be more details on how that will work later this autumn. You're aware, obviously, that we are already in the process of having removed the regional spatial strategy, and the planning bill is obviously a very lively topic at the moment, and that is obviously one that we're going to progress promptly. But, you know, there's a consultation. We want to make sure we get that right, because once you set the planning guidance, what business doesn't want is for us to come back 6 months later and go, actually, we just need that. That's the worst thing. So that's one we will want to make sure that we progress on promptly. So this is something that is happening over the next few months, as it were. There are a couple of areas where legislation may be required that will take a little bit longer. In practical terms, on trade, UKTI are already working with Neil and the team on the LEP, and that's where we want to make sure that they have strong roots with you as an LEP, so that as inward investment opportunities arise, there's an immediate channel of communication, and that's already being bedded in. I think it's a practical, it's not so much devolution, but it's getting those lines of communication right. And over the period between now and when the RDAs finish their work at the end of, in spring of next year, we'll be changing over the programs in things like business support and so on, and we're working directly with the LEPs. So there are a series of areas which we are handing over, transferring over the next period. But my ambition was always to make sure that the LEPs were up and running and were able to get on with their job a good few months, well before we actually saw the RDAs close. So there's a natural transition period. It's a complex one, but I think we're making good progress.
Thank you. Peter, are you happy with that timeline?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on what Mark said about certainty, because one thing that age brings you is some experience. And I've seen regional chambers, in Yorkshire and Humber, had regional chambers, then we had the regional assembly, then we had the RDA, now we've got LEPs. What we need is a period of certainty. And I think there's been far too much uncertainty so that business, you know, finds itself with a different structure every so often. And the point that Mark makes, I think, is well made about certainty. That's what we need. So we've got to allow these new structures to bed in. We've got to ask and continue to ask government to devolve. I mean, what's being said is fine, but the point I made about the regional growth fund bids, I think hopefully is something Mark can take up. Those bids are made, those decisions are made in London, and yet they are regional issues where we should be deciding within the region. So certainty is what we need. That's what business needs. It thrives on certainty.
Great, thanks, Peter. We've got some questions. Take a question from you, sir. We've got some microphones, which we'll just get over to you.
Thank you. It's Chris Glenn from the Federation of Small Businesses, Britain's biggest, largest business organisation with over 9,000 members in the Leeds City region. Coming to Mr McLean's speech earlier, when he talked about small businesses being a big part of the Leeds City region, unfortunately on the ground at the moment that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be far removed from that, and we're talking about it not being an RDA2, but at the moment that does seem to be how it's looking, although an RDA2 with no money. And there seems to be a focus still on big business, as there was within Yorkshire Forward, and particularly carrying on some of their failed policies in terms of clusters and things like that. But there seems to be no sort of interaction with small businesses at present.
Let's put that point to Neil. Neil, you're not helping small business, or you're not focused on small business.
I guess I'm known for combative responses, and I think you're about to get one, because I think that is a total misconception of what the LEP is doing. The LEP has recently set up its business executive group. We're talking to all the representative bodies that we can. We need people to engage. There is, I have to say, a bit of a history in this region of people not engaging and then criticising. We want to talk to everybody. It was the message I was trying to get across this morning. We need to hear really what the issues are, right down, you know, to the single man, single woman business. The opportunity for the LEP is to really bring business in its broadest sense together. And from a personal perspective, since I took over as chair, I think I've now done 31 or 32 Q&As, presentations, discussion groups, not one of them has been with large business. The great majority of them have been with small business groups, community business groups, and others. So the door is absolutely open, and there is no actual basis to say that all we are doing is focusing on large business. It is not the case.
Peter?
If I can just give a plug for my own authority. First of all, to confirm what Neil says, I mean, I can confirm that discussion's taking place at board level about making sure we look at small business. But just to give a plug for my own authority, we've created a Wakefield LEP. And that, again, is private sector led, public and private working together, private sector led. And the Federation of Small Businesses are very, very strong players, I have to say, in terms of our local Wakefield LEP. And that then links in directly to the city region LEP, so that people in my district know that they've got a voice that leads directly to the lead city region LEP. Any concerns they've got, I try and raise, and it works both ways. So I think one of the things we need to look at is how more people can get involved, although not directly on the main board, because that actually is unrealistic. But it's making sure that we devise mechanisms so there's the widest possible involvement from people from small businesses.
I suppose, Julian, having run a business yourself, you know that people running SMEs, small startups, they don't have the time to devote to organisations often, but they do need that help and they do need that communication.
I think that's right. I mean, if you're running a business and you're waking up in the middle of the night worrying about all sorts of business issues, you often don't have time to communicate with any sort of government body. The challenge is that the whole political world is about who shouts loudest. So if you do not shout or you do not articulate, it is going to mean that other people will get up that queue. And all I can say is that if the LEPs can have easy-to-use portals, internet, email, quick ways of getting feedback, I would just encourage businesses to engage as much as possible. I find it as an MP on bank lending. Mark has done brilliant work working with the banks and encouraging MPs to highlight cases of small businesses with credit issues. But the number of businesses that actually approach their MP is often limited. And I just think use us as much as possible. And even if it's a 2-line email, at least that gives the input to the LEPs or MPs or whoever you need to communicate with.
Great, thanks. Well, we've got time for a quick question. Gentleman at the back there with his hand up. We'll get a microphone to you as quickly as possible. If you give our assistant a wave there, great.
Thank you very much. James Stevens from the Home Builders Federation. The Minister referred to the draft National Planning Policy Framework, and that, of course, includes a provision for cross-boundary working and for the work of local authorities to be aligned with the work of the Local Enterprise Partnership. I just wanted to know from Neil McLean and Councillor Peter Box what thoughts they've had about how they might be able to align economic planning with land use and spatial planning.
Great. Neil?
Well, I think if you go back to what I was saying earlier in a general sense, one of the things that we have to do is absolutely align our activities together to achieving the overall economic objectives. And clearly land use and how we deal with land and how we deal with our infrastructure, they all go together. You know, we need houses where people want to live. We need houses where business wants to be. We need the infrastructure that serves both of those. None of these issues should be dealt with in isolation. And as a property development lawyer by discipline, you know, historically I have come across a lot of these issues where you are having isolated decisions without an understanding of the broader picture. And land use for housing, absolutely integral part of how we take the broader economy forward. Now, it's never that simple. You know, there are issues, there are planning issues, there are proper discussions, proper interrogations of proposals that have to be made. This can't be a free-for-all. But certainly, and Peter will comment for himself and the local authorities, certainly what I am seeing is very much an understanding that we really need to bring these things together. Peter?
Yeah, it's kind of been forgotten in a way that the city region leaders have been meeting together for some years now. And it is true, we have developed very strong relationships cross-party. And that's one of the issues we shall be looking at. We do work together and talk about how we can be more integrated as 11 local authorities. I was saying to someone the other day that if people come to see the wonderful new Hepworth Gallery in Wakefield, by the way, if you haven't heard of it, it is in Wakefield, £38 million worth of investment. People come to see the Hepworth Gallery. So they come to a product, not a place. And by and large, most people that we represent in our different ways, when they're driving along, they don't think, oh, I'm crossing the boundary now. I'm leaving Wakefield and going into Leeds. You know, it's not a big event for them. So people move from one product in one area to another. And I accept the point that we as local government leaders have to and will be looking at how we can work more closely together. Transport's a great example. You can't simply have a transport plan for Leeds without including Wakefield, and Keith's here. You can't have one for Leeds without including Wakefield, because you know people drive from A to B and they're crossing a border. So we accept we have to work in a city region way, more joined up, and we shall develop that, and planning won't be excluded.
Lovely, thanks very much. Well, unfortunately, we've been beaten by time. I want to thank all of the speakers today for your time. Mark, I hope that you found it a useful day. We've certainly found it very useful to listen to you, and we look forward to continued dialogue and actions as we move forward. Thank you very much, everybody. We're moving on very quickly to the...